Those on the Zoom call, please be aware that we're now being live streamed. Your microphones are live and being broadcast over the internet. The meeting is due to start at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
morning. My name is Fred Farias, and I'm honored that on June 3rd of this year, Governor Greg Abbott appointed me as chairman of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. I'm privileged to serve in this role, and I look forward to working advancing higher education in this state. The governor also appointed Ms. Donna Williams as vice chair of the board. Members, will you join me in congratulating Ms. Williams? It is now 9 o'clock a.m., and I would like to call the July 22nd quarterly board meeting to order. As we begin our meeting today, please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the Internet. At any point, any of us, including some of you in the audience, may be visible to anyone watching online. So as a reminder, please silence your cell phones and computers. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Members, please excuse the absence of Javed Anwar due to duties requiring his attention elsewhere. Do I have a motion to approve this absence?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Williams. A second?
Second.
Schwartz, thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Also at this time, I'd like to introduce our new student board member and tell you about him. His name is Matthew Boyd Smith. Matthew Boyd Smith is from Copperas Cove. He was appointed by Governor Abbott to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board in June of 2021. He will serve as the board's student representative through May 31st of 2022. Matthew currently attends Texas State University as a political science major. He graduated from Copperas Cove High School in 2018 and is currently serving as the Chief of Staff of the Texas State University Student Government. He previously interned for a law firm in Gatesville, Texas, and in 2019, interned for Congressman Roger Williams in Texas Congressional District 25. In high school, Matthew served on the Youth Advisory Council and participated in debate, DECA Emerging Leaders Program Band, and the Copperas Cove School Criminal Justice Club. Before becoming the Chief of Staff to Student Government, Matthew served as parliamentarian in the Student Senate. Matthew, welcome to the board, and would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to apologize for being a couple minutes tardy. Even though I have had an internship here before, I still forget how bad Austin traffic gets. What should be like an 8-minute drive ends up being a 10-minute drive, and I won't be late again. Thank you very much for introducing me to Chairman. I hope we have a very productive meeting.
Thank you, and congratulations on your appointment to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Matthew. We look forward to working with you. Next item on the agenda is committee appointments. Effective June 8th, I made the following appointments as chairman. Donna Williams as chair of the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success. Matthew Smith as ex officio member of the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success, the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics, and the Agency Operations Committee. I also appointed myself as a member to each of the standing committees, pending appointment of additional board members to our board and the reassignment of committees at that time, in order to ensure that we have a quorum during the committee meetings for this July meeting. Before we move forward on the agenda, I would like to make a few announcements. Our annual Texas Higher Education Leadership Conference will be held in Austin on December 1st through December 3rd. The Leadership Conference will include governing board orientation sessions that satisfy the statutory training requirement for newly appointed regents and elected trustees. The conference will also include sessions and speakers related to the refreshed 60 by 30 text plan, the Commissioner's State of Higher Education Address, and the Star Awards ceremony. Please look for save the date announcements and future communications regarding this important leadership conference. Next on the agenda will be agenda item 1C, which is the Commissioner's remarks.
I'll be brief, but just a few opening comments. First, I want to say I'm delighted and want to congratulate you on your appointment. I'm looking forward to working with you as chairman and vice chairman. Williams, I'm delighted to be working with you as well. We had a very robust conversation in committees yesterday. We have a lot going on this year at the coordinating board. This meeting, there will be a number of important initiatives that I'm looking forward to updating the board on and looking forward to discussions. In particular, we'll have a major policy conversation around digital learning. Of course, part of the silver lining of the disruptions of this past year, where all of our institutions accelerated their work to integrate technology into teaching and learning. With the initial investment of gear funds to the agency this last summer, we established a new division of digital learning. You'll hear from Assistant Singh about the work of that division and work in close partnership with the Technology Learning Advisory Committee, which is composed of all of the teaching and learning centers and digital learning. So that should be a terrific conversation, and looking forward to that update from Assistant Commissioners. You'll also get a public report on the review and revision of our 60 by 30 Texas. The board members are intimately involved in that work, but there's been important work underway these last several months to review where we are with the 60 by 30 Texas goals, and to consider how we might better align our state goals with what the state needs from higher education now. So the board will receive an update on those plans and on what the roadmap will look like. You'll also receive, now we have a regular update on transfer initiatives, which I think is appropriate because we have so much going on related to transfer that's through implementation of some major legislation that was passed last session, but also the collaborative work among universities and community colleges and the agency that resulted in the new Texas transfer framework. So the board will have an update on our work related to streamlining transfer. And finally, I'm looking forward to updating the board on the latest round of gear funds that were entrusted to the agency by Governor Abbott and legislative leadership, so $94.6 million, which is in addition to the $175 million that was allocated for higher education. I'm very excited about the work we have underway, and there's a lot we have to do quickly. So a number of agenda items that were discussed in the committees yesterday and will be discussed today will relate to being able to push forward the grants and contracts that will be the new gear funds. So again, we have a lot to share with you and a lot to discuss. And again, I want to say I'm looking forward to this discussion. Looking forward to.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your comments. We look forward, as well as the board, working. Next agenda item is public testimony. We have no request for public testimony, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 3, approval of minutes from previous meetings. Do I have a motion to approve the meetings of April quarterly board meeting? Motion by Mr. Torn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Williams. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. On to agenda item 4A, which is a major policy discussion. Policy discussions are topics of interest where staff, policy experts, and or stakeholders provide the coordinating board members with information on higher education policy matters or initiatives that have the potential to impact Texas statewide. Major policy discussion for this meeting will provide an overview of digital learning activities and discuss how to move higher education forward in Texas. Ray Martinez, Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Workforce Education, Dr. Michelle Singh, Commissioner for Digital Learning, will present the item and be available for questions. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the board. My name is Ray Martinez. I serve as Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Workforce Education. Commissioner Keller, as he did this morning in his opening remarks, often emphasizes how digital learning plays a vitally important role in shaping the future of higher education for Texas. Perhaps now more than ever that's true given the unprecedented disruption caused by COVID-19. As we all know, since April of last year, because of the COVID-19 global health pandemic, post-secondary institutions across the state, both public and private, had to pivot to online forms of teaching and learn to accommodate the need to remain physically distant for students and faculty alike. While digital learning was already gaining momentum across our colleges and universities prior to the pandemic, today faculty, institutional leaders, students, and policymakers are paying much greater attention to how digital learning works and its role in a post-pandemic environment. Commissioner Keller has stated on many occasions one of his overarching goals upon being appointed as commissioner was to transition this agency from a more traditional regulatory posture to become a much more effective resource, advocate, and partner for Texas higher education. Perhaps there is no greater example of this pivot for this agency to becoming more of a resource and a partner for our institutions of higher education across the state than the work we are doing in the digital learning area. Last fall, we were very fortunate to hire our agency's first Assistant Commissioner for Digital Learning, Dr. Michelle Singh. Dr. Singh comes to the coordinating board from Texas A&M University Corpus Christi, where she served as Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning Technologies since 2018. Over her 20-year tenure in higher education, Dr. Singh has held positions as chairperson of the board for the Texas Distance Learning Association, member of the United States Distance Learning Association Board, chair of the Texas A&M University System Council for Academic Technology and Innovative Education, and Michelle is also a former chair of this agency's Learning Technology Advisory Committee, otherwise known as LTAC. Clearly very qualified. She's also spent time in Alice, Texas, my hometown, Mr. Chairman, so even more credibility as far as I'm concerned. My pleasure now to turn this presentation over to Dr. Singh, who will tell you all about the exciting work happening here at the agency regarding digital learning.
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Martinez, Chairman Farias, Vice Chair Williams, and esteemed members of the board. Thank you for giving me some time today to have a conversation with you about how we leverage digital learning to move forward. And I think the best way to start this conversation is to talk a little bit about the division itself. And as was mentioned, it was established in November 2020, so very recently, but it was a long time coming. And as Dr. Justin Louder, the chair of the LTAC, mentioned yesterday during cause, it was very well received by the digital community. We saw that this board believed in digital learning and the power that it has to change the way that we approach higher education, especially at this very time. Let's talk a little bit about the mission of the division, which is to provide leadership and advocacy for digital learning in higher education and promote, sustain, and advance a quality digital learner experience that positions Texas as a world leader and results in globally competitive, digitally proficient citizens. I want to introduce the team, which is getting started like the division. Myself, I lead the division, but we do have Dr. Kyla Torre, who is our project director and single-handedly led digital learning efforts for the agency prior to the formalization of the division. So we owe a debt of gratitude to her work because it got us to a very strong place to really start to have a deep conversation over where we go from here. Ms. Amy Zandy is our executive assistant, and that rounds out what we like to call the mighty triangle. Thanks to GEAR funding, we were able to hire two temporary positions, two program specialists, Dr. Marianne Maddox and Dr. Liz Tolman, who round out the team. And so let's talk a little bit about the division goals for the incoming year. And so our goals are to increase awareness, build capacity, and recognize digital excellence across our state and our institutions. As was mentioned, we are not new to the digital learning game. The state has actually done wonderfully well for decades. We have nationally ranked programs. We have very competitive programs that have made a stamp on digital learning and are recognized internationally and nationally. So when we look at these divisions, the division as a whole, we may stop and think, but what exactly is your division going to do to contribute to where we go from here? And I think the best way for us to have this conversation is to really think about what we just lived. And what a year it was, a year and a half actually. We had hurricanes and tropical storms along the coastal bend of the state. We had a global pandemic that nearly paralyzed all of us, and we had a winter storm. So Texas has had its share of major events. events that were very trying to a community, but that digital learning was an asset to move forward. It actually was what was relied upon to get us through some of the most trying times in Texas. And the thing that we want to make sure that we highlight is that we came together as a community. You're probably very familiar with the saying, it takes an entire village to raise a child. Well, we like to say that it takes an entire institutional ecosystem as well as a community to cultivate student success. It took all of us coming together to make sure that we were able to make it through this new event that we were living. And it was beautiful to see. Our institutions came together, and you would see Wi-Fi parking lots that were available for students, and not just students, but for community. You would see parents parked in the parking lot getting on to do their work, and you would have their children next to them learning in their school settings via remote, and you would have their college students in the back seat doing their work. We also saw businesses that realized the need and decided to expand their Wi-Fi so that people could do the exact same thing. We came together as a community. And of course, everything was perfect, right? I mean, we get on a Zoom call and everything is flawless. There's no hiccup. Nothing ever goes wrong. And you're smiling at me, which tells me that is probably not accurate. As mainstream media depicts, we have digital interruptions, or we have things that happen in technology. It's the nature of the beast. Sometimes we have our new office mates, as we'll call them, that are living in our home, accidentally pop into a video screen at usually the most opportune times, I'll say. We do have some furry friends that sometimes really enjoy the warmth of a laptop, so they will come and probably lean in as well. We have some colleagues that got really creative on Zoom and may have done some distracting things as far as musical things going on in the background. Sure, there were times when you probably wanted to get your computer and throw it out the window, but there was a pandemic outside, and then you couldn't go get it, so you had to stop there. Your internet probably was not always ideal. It probably maybe didn't start at times that you really needed it to. And my favorite, which is when you are in a Zoom call and you have just given the response of your lifetime, and someone signals you like this and says, you're on mute. And I love that all of you kind of whispered that out, so clearly we're in good company. So these things happen, and you're probably thinking, wait, you're supposed to be promoting digital learning, right? Absolutely. But we have to make sure that we realize that these digital interruptions exist. It is not a perfect world, but there are several perks. There are perks in the sense that there was flexibility. People could work, people could continue doing what they were doing in the comfort and when they are at their best. If that meant sitting outside, having a cup of coffee, enjoying the scenery in your backyard, then you were able to do that. If that meant that you went to your favorite location and were able to get up, go to the refrigerator, get a snack, and come back, some of us may have done that a little more than we want to admit, you were able to do that. And if you had a really stressful or maybe had a really great meeting, you could celebrate that with someone right outside your door, whether that be a loved one or a furry friend. The beauty of going into a remote environment was we connected the world. Everybody was at a click away. So we were able to bring in experts from a global community to really enhance some of the content that we were delivering. We were able to extend outreach from several of the different events that we had. One example was our Open Texas Conference that normally was face-to-face and would have about 150 participants. With the help of digital learning, we actually had 1,100 registered participants across the state during a pandemic. That is very impressive. Even with meetings and events we've done here at the agency, we've seen when we have an audience of about 20 normally face-to-face, we now have 100. And we can still have robust dialogue and still move forward on things. And so I want us to definitely stay encouraged at the fact that there are several perks in what we do. But the greatest perk, clearly we are having some clicker. We're having update issues. Oh, perfect. It was a suspense moment. It was to build. The greatest perk out of everything was that we all got to experience a day in the life of digital learners. Day in and day out, we lived what our digital learning community experiences every single time that they engage in an online program. While digital learning extends to more than just online education, it gave us a preview. We lived the experience of having maybe questions such as, maybe we're still asking these questions, why? Why is this so hard? Why can't I do X, Y, and Z online? Or how? How did I not know about this until now? Or how can we streamline some of these advances that we've made? And what? What will it take to adopt these practices into mainstream education? What will it take to take some of these advances that we've made and make them the norm? What will it take to change the mindset? Right now, in the events that we described over the last year, we talked about how digital learning was definitely the medium for academic continuity. With the pandemic, we saw that it was also the medium for business continuity. But when do we get to the point where we start to look at digital learning as an integral piece of strategic institutional? When do we get to the point where we start to look at digital learning as the asset that it is? So I'm sure that we've either verbalized or heard the saying, we're going back to normal. We're going back to our pre-pandemic environments. We're going back to the way things were. We're going back. And we understand that. So what I encourage all of us to do is, as we resume our pre-pandemic environments, that we remember it is not a competition, not digital learning versus face-to-face. It is not one versus the other. It's not an all-or-nothing game. We like to say that we are not going to go back. We are going to move forward. We are going to move forward with digital learning and preserve some of the success that we had during the most trying time. We're going to capitalize on the innovation, on the creativity, the energy, the strategy, and the success that happened and was exemplified at all of our institutions when they were successful in a time that several people doubted. We are going to move forward by defining the new normal. The new normal in the sense that it is going to be about delivering the best experience regardless of the medium. There are rich traditions at our institutions. Traditions that cannot be replaced digitally, nor should they be. I remember my time at the University of Texas Pan American with very fond thoughts and memories that I can never, ever erase and will preserve for the rest of my life that were face-to-face. Those don't belong in a digital environment. But I also remember the digital advances that we had that allowed me to get to where I am today that cannot be replaced in a face-to-face environment. And so we definitely need to look at what is the new normal. New normal is the best experience for our students. The truth of the matter is the world has changed. Industry has changed. Our students are no longer competing against local audiences or even state audiences. With the pandemic, there was a new awareness over the fact that we are competing globally because industry has changed to where it's recruiting globally because now people have a taste of what remote work was like, and there was a lot of success in it. So what are we doing to prepare our students to make sure that they can be globally competitive, digitally proficient students? We are going to work with our institutions and partner with our institutions to leverage the resources and the effort that they put during the pandemic to make sure we can capitalize on that momentum. Whether it means retooling an academic space, there was a lot of money invested in infrastructure during the time that we needed to transition and pivot. And so what conversations are we having to see how we leverage those environments or modify them, maybe for a hybrid high-flex delivery that has gained a lot of advantage over this time? Continuing with things like ADVI and virtual career fairs that are extremely successful, and we have numbers to prove that. And making sure that we can have conversations over what is the best medium to deliver and achieve our goals. If you asked in 2019, what does digital learning impact? A lot of the conversation was based on academic affairs, where we had instruction, we had student success, we looked at instructional design, Center for Faculty Excellence, state authorization, things like that. If you ask in 2021, what does digital learning impact? The answer is everything. Enrollment management changed, institutional advancement changed, athletics changed, student engagement changed. Everything changed because we gave ourselves a chance to try something new. So when we say, what does digital learning impact, and we say everything, it affects how we teach, how we learn, how we do business, how we live. During the pandemic, one of the examples that really resonated with me and several of the digital learning community was a faculty member who realized that he could use the power of digital learning to affect positive change in his community. Dr. Yarabali and that is how I'm going to pronounce it. I apologize if that is not correctly stated, who is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin in the Division of Computer Science and Engineering, got together with his neighbor and did a YouTube video to fix his tankless water heater. We realized there was a shortage of labor and parts during this trying time, but people needed heat. And so he decided to rely on the power of digital learning to make sure that his neighbors would be able to work on their water heaters. He also recruited some people to help the community as well. But this is the power of digital learning. This is the power of digital learning in society. So how do we harness the power the way that this professor did? Change the narrative. We move forward. We move from this idea that remote learning is quality digital learning, because there is a significant difference between the two. We move from online only being synonymous with digital learning to all methods of learning being considered digital. We move from digital learning being a specialty to it being mainstream and being more welcomed across the board. We move from teaching and then learning about technology to a synergistic teaching learning through technology idea. We move from it being academic-centric to being institution-centric. And we move from digital learning being only for disaster recovery to being part of a successful business strategy. We move the conversation from going back to moving forward. I started off by saying, what does the Division of Digital Learning do? We are going to help move forward by listening and engaging with our stakeholders. As was mentioned, we have a Learning Technology Advisory Committee that is made up of experts from across the state, experts that range from highest level administrators to practitioners and instructional designers. We want to make sure that we understand what the community needs and what the community is experiencing. And as a 20-year practitioner, I definitely value and know the value that LTAC brings to the table. We also constantly want to engage with our stakeholders and listen to their voices. So we have things like the Digital Learning and Educational Technology Survey that we send out to institutions, and the Open Educational Resources OER Landscape Survey that we do in partnership with Digitex and with ISKME. These are two important pieces because they let us know what exactly does the view of digital learning and OER look like for the state. The one we're most proud of right now that we are currently engaged in is a research engagement with the University of Texas at Austin School of Design and Creative Technologies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but to give you the gist of it, this research engagement is designed to figure out what happened during the pandemic. There was a lot of momentum from students, staff, and faculty, but we want to know what exactly was going on, what services are needed, what programs and projects are needed that our community is wanting and will utilize. So we are designing a clearinghouse in partnership with everyone. We're not designing for, we're designing with our stakeholders. We serve our institutions on multiple levels. We have several grants that we do. You've seen the success of that. You approved the Open Educational Resources Report and hopefully got to see some really great numbers in that. We have grants in implementation and development. So we're not just worried about curating some of these, we're actually creating and giving back to the community to be leveraged. We have over 34,000 students that have been affected by the OER implementation and development work. We are also going to launch, moving forward, capacity building grants, where we're going to provide academies for a framework so that if your institution does not have a thriving digital learning or OER program yet, we are going to provide the framework that would allow people to have a conversation on their campuses and a guide so that it's easier and you can take the guesswork out of it. We also serve as advocates. The division personnel is actually involved in national and state boards, so our voice is being heard at the national level, but we also take the national perspective and bring it to Texas. I do like to say that more so we take the Texas perspective and share it with the nation, but that may be a little bit biased. We also present at all different kinds of conferences, national, international conferences. We are very active in committees as well. We are where our digital community lives. Virtually or face-to-face, we make it a point to share the resources that we have to get the word out there. We support our digital community through academies or through professional development. We just recently launched the Open Educational Resources Core Elements Academy. It was slated for about 50 faculty. Within 1 hour of sending out the memo, we had 112 faculty that had registered, which tells us there is a need and a want to make sure to come together and share as a community. Because of that, we are actually going to continue and offer an OER Advanced Skills Academy in the next semester by popular demand and by the participants that were in there. We're also going to design, as I mentioned, a digital learning and OER playbook academy so that we have the resources that others can leverage across the state. We also pride ourselves on being able to provide different resources to bring our community together, an opportunity to connect with one another. I mentioned the Open Texas Conference earlier, but we're also going to have an OER Texas Creator Fest, which takes us out of just developing materials in theory and with certain only grant participants to opening up to the entire group of Texas that wants to learn more about how do I get creative? How do I go into open educational resources if I'm a novice? And it's wonderful because it really gets to showcase the work that has been done by our faculty, and they get to speak to our faculty. We're also preparing a digital learning summit where we're going to take all of the different grants that have anything to do with digital learning and showcase the talent that we've been harnessing over this time. We take pride in partnering with our institutions. We make it a point. We know where the experts are. They're in Texas, and they're at our institutions. So we make it a point to come together and to bring the expertise to the level that can be shared by the state. This last round of OER grants taught us something. We decided to start something called Technology Assistance Partners, TAPs as we like to call them. The reason that we created a TAPs group was because we are very much familiar with the idea that not every institution has the resources within their campus or the expertise to support innovative developments. But we do have institutions in Texas that do have that expertise and can share it with their colleagues. So we partner with our TAPS group so that they can assist the grantees, but also train the institutional resources and personnel so that they then can go and help the rest of the faculty within the university. So currently we're partnering with the University of Texas at Austin, Charles A. Dana Center, Dallas College, and OpenStax at Rice University. And I've mentioned the partnerships with Digitech, IFME, and Texas Digital Library. This is just the beginning of the game. One of the things that we are extremely proud of, and this is the work that I mentioned earlier, we're very proud that we are going to create the Digital Learning Clearinghouse, a digital learning clearinghouse that is not common nationally or internationally. It's an idea that will set Texas apart, and we are calling it DLTex, affectionately. It is going to be a comprehensive digital learning resource, program, and service site, or hub, which facilitates community connections and knowledge sharing to move digital excellence forward. This is a landing page. It is a page where we facilitate connection with faculty, with staff, with institutions, with researchers, policymakers, and leaders in the field. We want people to say that through digital learning in Texas, we educate, we learn, we drive change, we innovate, we advocate, and we lead. Each one of these action verbs will have a persona that is assigned to that specific level of service, level of programs, and level of resources. For educate, we have faculty. For learn, we have students. And for drive change, institutions, which will become phase 1 of the project. Phase 2 is innovate for researchers, advocate to connect policymakers, and phase 3 is lead. We're very well aware that there is a lot of leadership in Texas and a lot of innovation, and we want to make sure we highlight it so that others can see that as well and follow that trend. So let's take a deeper dive into what phase 1 looks like, and this is funded by our GEAR funds, so we're very appreciative of that. Phase 1 will feature across these 3 different personas learning opportunities, the ability to do both synchronous and on-demand types of learning videos, whether they be online workshops, similar to the work that LinkedIn does and things like that. But the different feature is that these will be for faculty by faculty, for students by students, and for institutional resources by institutional colleagues. It is important because it makes it a point to put on-demand resources when they are needed the most. If someone wants to look online for a resource, they don't need to go outside of Texas. We'll have DL Texas ready for them. We want to connect colleagues. We know there are exemplars everywhere. We know there are exemplars in both the faculty level, and we know there are stories that our students have of success in the work that they've done. That's encouraging. When you hear from your peer group, it encourages you to do things better than you would have before. We want to make sure that we can highlight their voices. We also want to make sure that we can connect people through a relational database. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a faculty member in computer science, I want to connect with another faculty in computer science, not just any faculty. I want to meet someone that is at a minority-serving institution in South Texas with a population of 15,000 to 20,000. I can put in those parameters and get a list of other faculty that are part of this community as well, where we can have a conversation. It doesn't stop there. If I'm an institution that is trying to get a learning management system, I don't need to guess at whether or not I'll be successful. I can actually put in my parameters into a relational database and find the other institutions in Texas that are already engaged in this LMS, but that also have a specific academic integrity software and also have a video streaming platform, so that I can find out compatibility on the technical side and I don't have to worry about that after an implementation. It changes the game when we can talk to each other and really harness the power of best practices that have been proven at institutions. We want to showcase some of those best practices that I keep referring to. We know that institutions, whether small or large, have a lot of success in the work that they do, and that some of their work can be scaled across the state. But a lot of the times we don't have that work out there for people to follow. We don't have guides. We don't have templates. This will allow us to share those templates so that we can build on the work and the success of others. We really are sitting on the shoulders of giants when it comes to digital learning. Let's make sure that we can continue to elevate the level of digital excellence by banking on the work that others have done and proven practices. We want to build community, and the Clearinghouse allows us to be able to have social engagement tools such as groups, hubs, that we can connect special interest groups. If I am very curious about learning about a certain academic integrity software, I can. If I want to learn about open educational resources specifically for biology, I can create a hub. And so it's important that we continue to cultivate this social engagement, because that really is how we learn and grow. And of course, as mentioned, we're going to host our virtual events and continue to bring our community together. One of the things that I'm most proud of after getting to the agency for a whopping 8 months now is that we are also elevating the level of digital excellence at the agency. We are engaged in projects right now that are truly defining our digital service catalog. And you've heard about several of them just in yesterday's meeting and the other work that you've done. My Texas Future, Texas Works, our Data Modernization Initiative, ADVI, Texas OnCourse, the 60 by 30 Texas work that we're doing, and the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate Program. We are being creative in the work that we do, and we are trying to model for our institutions that we too are learning how to navigate this new normal. We're expanding our digital service catalog. We're very excited about the $94.6 million in gear funding that we are receiving. And we also are aware that, and I want you to be aware, that we didn't call out digital learning in any one particular catalog or one category. Instead, we are going to partner with every division that is leading every single one of these specific categories and see how we can infuse digital learning into what is being done. We are living our values. We are changing how we have this narrative. So whether it be working with our student success group and creating campus action plans and putting them in DL text for others to see, or it be working on micro-credentialing and stackable credentialing via digital medium like competency-based education, accelerated curriculum, hybrid, high-flex environments. Whether it be partnering with reskilling and upskilling and making sure that we can provide an avenue for open educational resources in these key areas, we are going to work collectively as an agency to make sure that we are elevating and continue to elevate the level of digital learning excellence that we have. But change isn't easy. If it was, everybody would do it all the time and there would be no resistance to it. It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes commitment, resources and support. It takes teamwork, vision, strategy, and it takes champions. It takes you. It takes all of us. The bottom line is that we want people to say that Texas got it right, that in times of adversity and major catastrophes, we came together as a state, and instead of focusing on the negative that was going on, we took the best of what was happening, and we leveraged it to move forward. We move digital learning forward. We moved higher education forward. We moved Texas. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, for the excellent presentation, and Deputy. Tell you that that's very impressive. Learning well for higher UT.
Proud Valley native.
Yes, so I'm proud of you being an alumnus of that university. Board members, any questions for our panel?
I have a question. Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Dr. Singh.
Yes.
Dr. Singh, I mean, I appreciate your presentation. It was excellent. It appears that when we talk about digital learning, that the perception is often there that it was an accommodation made to help us get through this global pandemic. But as I understand your comments, you think that our role as Texans is to take this on and embrace it and then use it to drive the state forward. How do we fix that perception gap?
So I think one of the key principles is the differentiation between online learning and synonymous to digital learning. A lot of the times people automatically think that when you say digital learning, you think about fully online programs, and we need to change the conversation. It's not just about online programs. It's about a face-to-face program that incorporates YouTube, that incorporates digital community, global community experts coming in. And so we need to change the narrative. We need to make sure that there's clarity in what we're doing. The other piece is the pandemic was an interesting time for digital learning because it exemplified and really highlighted remote learning versus quality digital learning, which the state has been doing very well in. And so it's a matter of making sure that we can highlight those successes that have been in existence for decades, making sure that we highlight those examples and how programs are done through a thoughtful manner with resources being invested, with time for creation. And I think that's how we'll start to transition people's mindset. Not everyone has to be a believer in online education. We just have to believe in the power of digital learning.
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Raven. Mr. Torn, you have a question.
Yeah, so Dr. Singh, purpose in your past. I'm not smart enough to understand all these. I always say the proof is in the pudding. My question to you, I'm a student or a student to be, historically underserved, not have access or the environment nor the funding to professional education. I understand the benefits of cost and the deliver the nuts and bolts. What concerns me and what I experienced with my grandkids who are college students during the pandemic is the opportunity to interact with other students and faculty through my intellectual curiosity and to interact with members of the business community who are actually I can actually present myself to so that more opportunity. How will that be addressed?
So I think that's a very real concern. And again, a lived experience. The lived experience one more time during remote learning. So I'm going to shift a little bit to quality digital learning programs. So we have an example of a faculty member that actually meets with their students, and this is not during this time, meets with their students on a weekly basis, is able to connect one-to-one with them, facilitates group discussion and interaction within groups online, is able to set conversations that you would actually have in a face-to-face environment online. The issue is not whether or not the experience can be replicated online, is are we empowering our faculty and our institutions with the resources and support to understand how to do this effectively. A lot of what happened in remote learning was we didn't have the time to prepare our faculty adequately to really provide these enriching experiences. And it wasn't just higher ed. K-12 went through the same thing. And so a lot of the students feel similarly to the experience that you're talking about. They got what was a pivot, a transition that was so rapid. A lot of our faculty didn't have the ability to explore how do you create this energy online? How do you create these relationships? As a previous fully online faculty, I will tell you I am still very close to my doctoral students and my undergrad dual credit students that we actually had online. It is hard work, and it is very different. But I also knew what I was doing and had been prepared for months before jumping into an environment. And so that makes the difference. We also have to study our programs, and I think that's really important to say, is we're currently working on our measurement framework so we can establish baselines so we can see. We're wanting to hear from our staff, our faculty, and our students with the UT research engagement so we can know these stories, so we can find out what was lacking. Where do we need to put resources so that we can create these rich, robust experiences that we know are possible?
Well, I commend you. Is the future. To urge all of us. End goal is opportunity for all students to have opportunities.
Questions, members, or comments for the panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier when you were discussing phase one, which it seems is focus coming up, that in the student-focused area, we'd be developing programs that were by students for students. What are some ways that students will be involved in this development to make that efficient for them? Oftentimes, our schools will come up with these new websites or housing platforms for our various projects, and they'll just...
Very good point and a very good question. I go back to the design research engagement. We actually are talking to our students. They are our primary audience for that specific learn category. The reason I say that it's for students by students is because we are working with our students. We want to make sure that we don't assume the expert role and create these resources without actually talking to the consumer that is going to be using these. So our students are a key part. In LTAC, we actually have a student representative that sits on the LTAC and is amazing and advises us on so many different things and provides angles to concepts that we hadn't considered because she's living and breathing this on a regular basis. So to answer your question, sir, we are going to walk with students every step of the way to create a resource that they find utility in and can be a part of. This also provides opportunities for internships or for students to be able to showcase their work at a state level and hopefully national level, because I do believe that this will gain so much traction from other states because we're one of the few that will actually have that.
For your answer and for your time.
Other comments or questions, Commissioner?
I could just make one. First, just to underline how enthusiastic we work on digital learning, but also one of the reasons that we thought it was especially important to hear about this work is it exemplifies our commitment to be resource, to be credible partners, to be advocates. So to be resource, yes, and grants, and our innovators accelerate innovations within and across our campuses, to stand up a hub of digital learning shared across the campuses, but not done for the campus, but done in close partnership with our campuses, with serious design work. With the result would be useful. We don't just want to create more websites or more applications. In fact, those are going to need to resonate with faculty, with our students. And so what we're doing in digital learning is important for pioneering that sort of resource for the institution and for the agency. Or what's tended to happen in digital learning is you've had beautiful work that's happened in silos. You've had individual faculty innovators or individual campuses that are doing amazing things that you might not know about. Through the work that we're organizing, the idea is to connect those innovators to create a network of the innovators, also to increase the visibility of those innovations already being implemented. Important as a first step for us, alluded to, that we intend to build upon in our work on student success and innovation. So appreciate the board's strong support, and again, want to underline this would not be possible without the support and investment from and the legislative leadership. So we have a unique opportunity to do something really important.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner. And you said it's very important, and this is such a timely policy discussion, obviously, but increased visibility is what it's noticed that you said, and that's exactly right. I totally agree with you. Very important, because this is important work as far as the future is concerned for education, so thank you. Are there any other comments? Yeah, it's Mr. Wilson.
Yes, just to echo, follow up on what the Commissioner was saying. My concern is we create a perfect hub, ever known to man, and no one knows about it. No one no one uses it day to day. So there's a plan to do a road show, go out and find these universities and not just sign up one faculty member there to spread the word, but kind of force information on the.
So that's our UT Design Research Engagement, and we currently, I'm very proud to report, have over 750 participants that are giving us feedback. We had a call out that said, we want to hear your voice. We want you to tell us about your experience. And we had administrators, faculty, and students that make up more than 750 video testimonials, letting us know what their experiences was like, what their needs are, what services they want, and what they would use. And then we're going to definitely plan on user interaction testing. We want to make sure that we have people that look at this, pilot it, tell us if it's good, tell us if it's not, where can we improve, where can we not. But we also plan to look at a lot of the resources and study the resources that institutions have that are successful. Because our Center for Faculty Excellence at a lot of our institutions are doing very similar work, but specifically tailored to their populations. This is us bringing it to that other level. But we want to learn from the experiences that, yes, every intention to test.
I think
Yes.
thing that struck me many years ago is when all these search engines popped up on so much content on the web now. The question is, what's quality, what's not, and how do I get to what I need to get to? And that's when the library science became popular again. So there's such an art and a science, really, to categorizing and prioritizing and identifying quality. So I think it's a big challenge, and I think you all are doing.
Williams?
Our energy is infectious. Thank you for being here. You make it, you put it in layman's terms where we all get it, like this is a really good thing, and it is. Being probably the resident geek on the board, my eyes are just fluttering. This is awesome. So I have to tell you, YouTube got me through the pandemic, fixing everything in the house. I was talking to Malcolm last night about passion for YouTube, going and learning how to do different things from fixing the air conditioner to whatever, Welcome, and we're glad you're here. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board members for the panel? Not. Thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner Martinez. Thank you, Dr. Singh, very much for. Next, we will move on to the next item, members. Our next section is the matters relating to the full board. Agenda item 5A is acceptance of gifts and donations to the board. Members, the gifts and the donations are listed in your materials. Nicole Bunker Henderson, our general counsel, is available for questions. Read the material in advance, so members, do you have any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the gifts and donations as listed?
So moved.
We have a motion for Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second, please? Second by
Second.
Mr. Torn. All in favor? Or first of all, any discussion? Not. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next agenda item 6B is 60 by 30 Texas revision update. Discussion and possible action on process for ongoing revision of the plan. Melissa Henderson, Associate Commissioner. Welcome, Melissa. We'll provide this overview and be available for question, members. Henderson, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Farias and members. My name is also as the Executive Director. As you know, last fall we launched a joint effort between the Coordinating Board and the Texas Higher Education Foundation to revise and refine the state's 60 by 30 Texas to better incorporate 4 key dimensions: leveraging and accelerating innovation to drive new discoveries, economic development, and prosperity for our regions and our states; expanding our focus to include more attention to the adult learners, especially for skill and upskill; prioritizing high-value credentials that align to current and future job opportunities; and finally, ensuring all Texans have equitable access to the information all Texans can participate in, contribute to, and benefit from our economic recovery. This work is comprised of 2 interrelated components: stakeholder engagement and the development of the revised metrics and goals. I'd like to start with a quick update on the stakeholder engagement. Convening our steering committee, which is made up of members representing this board and the Texas Higher Education, have provided invaluable historical context and future direction to this work, and will continue to. Building on the listening tour we hosted in partnership earlier this year with colleges, universities, and in late June, we hosted a virtual. We invited all those who had been engaged through the listening tour to join us for this event. Governor Abbott, the Commissioner, state and national experts in these focus areas. In this event, we reflected back to participants what we heard across the listening sessions and began to lay the foundation for the work ahead as we begin to narrow in on specific metrics. We were pleased to have nearly 300 people join us for that virtual event and have now posted it online for additional. We are also preparing to engage in message testing work to ensure that the language that we're using as we articulate the revised strategic plan resonates with key audiences. Finally, we continue to engage institutional stakeholders and other thought leaders in discussions around these areas to ensure that we are hearing from and continue to share information with our partners. As we think about how best to incorporate adult learners more intentionally and explicitly into our goals, I wanted to provide a bit of context. While most states have attainment goals, Texas is relatively unique, focusing its goal exclusively on the 25 to 34-year-old population. At the same time, we have 4 million Texans with some college, no credential, and Texas is On the left, you can see here that when we look at attainment by age, the variance between the 25 to 34-year-old population and the 35 to 64-year-old population is rather small. The lowest attainment is in our 65 and older population. Right, when you combine the ages, the variance is again small, with the lowest attainment rate being that of the full 25 and up range. As you know, there's a strong correlation between attainment and employment, with those with the highest attainment and lowest unemployment. We break that down by age range over the last year. Same pattern consistent across age ranges, with the highest unemployment being experienced by 25 to 34-year-olds with and no college, and our lowest unemployment being experienced by our 35 to 44-year-old college graduates. Building from this data and our conversations with committee and stakeholders, we will be examining whether to expand the age range for the attainment goal to be inclusive of all working age adults, or whether to have specific targets for specific age. We maintain focus on the population into post-secondary, while also adding focus on working. Turning to high-value credentials, the disruptions over the past year accelerated changes that were already underway in our economy. Some of those changes will continue to accelerate as the recovery picks up. While we're creating tens of thousands of new jobs in Texas, there are substantial distances between skills good jobs require and the skills and credentials many of our must work together, especially across educational institutions and employers, to make sure all Texans are able to participate in and benefit from the educational and training opportunities. This is the lens through which we're approaching the work to incorporate goals at identifying and prioritizing high-value credentials in the strategic plan. Two goals in the existing security plan have relevance for this discussion. One related to marketable skills and the other related to student debt. These goals relate to assessing the value of credentials after the student graduates and moves into. The first goal, related to marketable skills, is captured here, as are the two targets. One, that all institutions identify marketable skills for each academic program. Two, a goal to maintain the enrolled 1 year after earning a degree or certificate. Here you see that the meeting of this target has been maintained launch of the plan in 2015. Likewise, the student debt goal has also held constant between 59 to 60% in 2018. 17 is the year. While it's critically important that we continue to ensure students are entering the workforce with the skills necessary to succeed and without overly burdensome levels of debt, it's encouraging that these targets have been and continue to be met, and perhaps invites us to examine value in additional ways. In our virtual summit last month, one of our panelists, John Gustafson, Director of Workforce Partnerships, said, estimates demonstrate as many as 300 million workers, or 14% of the global workforce, will have to switch occupations and acquire new skills by 2030 because of automation and artificial intelligence. This, along with many other examples and data points, underscore what the Commissioner illustrated in his opening remarks for the summit. So, we don't just need more credentials. We need credentials that help Texans, skills that align with good job opportunities, short-term credentials that align with current and emerging workforce. Earlier this spring, the steering committee discussed the proposed definition of high-value credentials as those that are quality, affordable credentials that certify Texans have attained knowledge and skills that equip them for strong career trajectories, for earnings opportunities, and high-demand jobs for Texas employees. This definition has implications for the right form of measurement for high-value credentials. To align with this definition, the measurement should focus on student graduation outcomes in the workforce, specifically their employment and salary outcomes. Ideally, the forms of measurement used will focus not only on short-term outcomes, but also on how graduates fare in the medium. Post-graduation outcomes data, combined with cost of credential data, help form a picture of the affordability of the credential. As we continue to explore potential metrics in this, we'll continue engaging our partners across a diverse array of institutions, public and private, 2-year and 4-year, and health-related institutions, leaders from the business community, our agency colleagues across the tri-agencies, others to help refine and push our thinking in a wide-ranging area. Ensure alignment with other work in this space, such as the pathways work of the tri-agency. Finally, I'd like to provide some context for the discussion best to incorporate research and development into our goals. While Texas ranks 3rd in the nation in total research expenditures, we receive only 7% of all U.S. R&D expenditures, and those are spread over a larger number of institutions. Only 2 Texas institutions, public or private, rank in the top 25 nationwide. Here you see that represented visually for the top 15 falling behind California and New York. In this slide, you see those expenditures broken out by institution type over 5 years. Texas health-related institutions. There are currently several state-funded research initiatives captured to provide supports to differing programs as they As we work to identify metrics for the statewide goals, we will aim to create alignment where possible with those required for these programs. To inform our thinking about potential metrics and goals, we have been reaching out to and engaging stakeholders from a broad array of institutions, private, as well as partners from other organizations engaged. Some of what we heard from them is that it's important to consider inputs, process, and outputs, as well as quality of research. We also heard that while commercialization metrics are valuable, they're difficult to track, and our current data is limited in this capacity. We anticipate that as we narrow in on metrics and work to set goals, that there will likely be measures that we are able to capture today, and others that we believe, based on our research and stakeholder engagement, are meaningful, and that would require additional work to determine how best to capture. Across each of the focus areas, this work is highly iterative and rapidly evolving as we learn more and push our thinking about how best to understand what we can meet today and what we need to be able to capture and measure to move this work. In the coming weeks, we will continue to develop greater clarity and granularity in our definitions, metrics, and goals around each of these areas, and we'll come back to you later this year with a set of refined, refreshed goals for your community. Finally, I would be remiss in not mentioning across all of these areas, we know that maintaining a focus. As was stated by two of our panelists during the virtual summit, Ruth Watkins, President of Strata Impact, and Marcela Escobari, Senior Fellow with the Brookings Institute. First, quote, "We need to represent the society that we serve better than we historically have." Second, the economy looks very different than in 2015. In a time of massive economic expansion, equity is a critically important component of work and one that we will be embedding across each of the other focus areas to work to meet these goals. We are doing so equitably. Touch briefly on process. Proposed to post for public comment in the Texas Register beginning July 30th, and to keep that comment period open until August 20th. This will allow us time to receive and respond to those comments and to have that reflected in your October board material. To conclude, a high-level summary of the work ahead between now and October, where we will be coming back to you with a set of refined, refreshed indicators and goals for your.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. An excellent presentation and giving us an update on the refresh. I just want to state on behalf of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, all of us, the work, the partnership with that board, standing members and leadership with work that you and your staff are doing, and the collaboration, quite frankly, the longest that it's ever been, and very important, and the work that the Foundation's doing, able to provide opportunities to initiatives and for higher education. And so thank you for all that work, and I was really impressed with stakeholder engagement with the projects over our state, and some of those quotes that you had, and I'll notice the dates on those. I mean, that's all very recent here. And so the engagement with the community and just involving with industry and business is key, and this all board members will be making board meeting, so I appreciate the update, and doing and how it impacts state, and congratulations to you and your team for the outstanding fundraising work that you've done on that end to help provide opportunities for programs. We do this, education in our state. So, board members, any questions or comments for Ms. Henderson? Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I would just add that in all the discussions on the committee, it's difficult to watch. So many different ways to measure something. The discussion on what is success really resonates, really move the workforce forward to higher ed, and you get a job at the end. Involving the employers, I think, is very. Thank you for doing that. Sam, I've learned this morning I was feeling depressed because I thought I was getting old. Now I just know I'm just getting less young. So I feel a lot better. I feel a lot better than I did earlier.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Not, thank you, Ms. Henderson, for the presentation and continued work. And I really appreciate, you know, your board. Okay, so we're going to move on. And before we move on to the next item, I do want to make a comment. For those of you that are online, watching online, I know I've been told that there's a technical difficulty sound. Our staff is working on that now, so that may be an issue for some of you. So it's not your particular computers or technology. We're working on that here at the coordinating board. So, next topic, members, is item 6C, which is an update on the Texas transfer. Another very important issue that has been brought to us by the legislature, right, Commissioner, and Matthew, as a student, this is an issue that we've been working on for years because it's a moving target, is the way to describe it. But there's actually some really good movement this past legislative session, and so we're great to have an update on this Texas transfer framework. Substantially improving transfer, particularly for students attending community colleges who plan to transfer to public four-year universities, continues to be a priority for the coordinating board. Senate Bill 25 passed the 86th legislature in 2019. It strengthened transferred policies and included several provisions to improve transfer for Texas students. Dr. Stacy Silverman is here as Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs. She'll present the item and be available for questions, and Deputy Commissioner Martinez is here as well. Dr. Silverman?
I'll jump in first, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Yes,
just
sir.
do a quick 30-second overview and then turn it over to Dr. Silverman. This is another example of, you've heard the Commissioner say on a couple of occasions already during our meeting today, and something I emphasized with Dr. Singh's presentation with digital learning. We're under the Commissioner's leadership, we're really trying to change the default position of this agency so that our focus is on being a resource, a partner, an advocate for institutions of higher education across the state. I get the privilege of working on many different policy issues and get to be surrounded by wonderful experts like Dr. Silverman and Dr. Singh, who help to implement these issues. And two comments I'll make before I turn it over to Stacy. For transfer in particular, there are two things that we need to accomplish that I think exemplify the Commissioner's emphasis on being a resource and a partner. The first is, for transfer, we can't do this without engagement and collaboration with our institutions of higher education across the state. We just can't do it. We can't take this transfer, as complex as it is, and say that as a state agency, we're going to tell you all how to do this. We know how to do this. That's just not the approach that we can take with an issue like this, and we have not under Commissioner Keller's leadership. We have engaged our public four-year institutions across the state, our community colleges across the state, and not just in a few conversations. We've engaged them with meaningful collaboration and brought them together to talk to us on numerous occasions. You've heard us talk about some of the work we've done with the new Texas transfer framework that you all adopted as a board in a special call board meeting in March. And that will continue. We cannot do this without institutional engagement, and that's key. I'd say the second thing that's equally important, perhaps even more so, is that we can't pretend to know what is best for students. We have to and what you'll hear, and this is an item that you probably know by now, at the Commissioner's direction, we're giving you, every board meeting, we're going to come and give you an update on our efforts on improving transfer. And one of the things that has happened that you'll hear from Dr. Silverman since our last update was the formation of a new advisory committee. And we made sure that with the formation of that advisory committee that we have student representatives on that who have been through the transfer process, by the way, who can advise that 24-member advisory committee that is a key committee that will engage directly with Commissioner Keller as he makes decisions about how we can improve transfer moving forward. So we need institutional engagement, and we need to not pretend that we know what's best for students. We need to hear it from students themselves. And I think that's key for us to make some progress on transfer. With that, I'll turn it over for a brief overview to Dr. Silverman. Stacy.
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to see everyone this morning as well. I'll provide an overview of how we're meeting the Senate Bill 25 obligation, which is the best current measure of progress to date for this priority. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the progress made so far on the statutory obligations of Senate passed by the Texas legislature. The SB 25 made important facilitate transfer, foster academic credit, improve timely graduation of students. First statutory obligation added a question: 1,000 institutions share a student's application. Other institutions, the student was not admitted to the next obligation is a requirement to have students file degree plans earlier in their education. For the first-time freshman student, they file their degree plan when they complete 30 semester credit. Full credit students now file a degree plan. Vision will help students that students take that don't apply to their major. Third obligation on this table is the study of core and meta major. That helped develop the survey met in fall 2020. Also posted and available. And the report for non-transferable credit was completed and submitted on March 1st. Provisions of SB 5 codified the establishment of articulation, allow for data sharing from high school to post-secondary, provided funding for some specific. One provision that is underway is the implementation of recommended Associated Rulemaking Committee those rules, which are on the agenda for adoption today. The agency hosted 2 webinars on how to report for the first time. Some additional successes related to transfer are the development, as Ray mentioned, of the Advisory Committee. They held their first meeting on June 3rd. They called for the development of 2. Call for nominations is out now for members of the 2 subcommittees in the discipline of criminal justice and business. The work of the subcommittees will begin in August. SAC will hold its next meeting. I'd like to invite Deputy Commissioner to add anything he'd like to at this point, and I'm happy.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add is that you know, we're glad to report to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the board members that we continue to make progress in this area. There are many moving pieces, and we have to focus not just on vertical transfer, our students moving from a community college to a 4-year institution, but other types of transfer, lateral transfer from a student that moves from Texas State University to U of H, for example, and that's something that I was talking to our student board member, Mr. Smith, about last night. So we're trying to do this in a strategic way, but again, in a way that engages our institutions and our system to make this successful. So happy to address any questions or hear of any comments that you might have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chairman Martinez. This is so I think it's important for us to talk about this regularly. calls that we get too. Well, and I really like to hear, have heard that you said you and students have gone through the recent process. I wasn't a transfer student, and that was a few years ago. Welcome, it wasn't recent. But I know that the rules change, and so I think it's great to hear that you have student engagement that have gone through the process. And so, no, thank you for the update. Members, any comments or questions?
No question.
Yes, Williams.
On the minute obligations, the one on the dashboard where the students meet file plan earlier on, can you elaborate on it?
Yes, absolutely. So if a student is taking, for example, dual credit, what we hope this means is that they will take dual credit, not just whatever dual credit is out there to be offered, but really focus on what's going to apply to their degree plan so that they know, and built into this, the course sequencing help with this an awful lot. So students will have that degree map that they know exactly which courses are recommended to take semester by semester, so that they can easily, if they're a high school credit, they can know what would apply if they want to go down whatever educational path. And I just have to add that I managed as a college student to hit 3 universities in Texas in the first year and a half of my college career. So I do know transfer personally from that perspective.
Community colleges self-report. How do we know for sure?
Well, yes, we do not have a reporting requirement around filing a degree plan, but the institute it's in statute, so they are statutorily obligated to adhere to that.
Comments for the panel? Hearing none, thank you all very much for the update.
Thank you.
Agenda item 6D, Commissioner Martinez, don't go too far. You're up again. Update on the Star Award program. Ray Martinez, Deputy Commissioner of Academic Affairs and Workforce Education, and Dr. Ginger Gosman. Hello, Dr. Gosman. Senior Director for Innovation and Policy Development, will present this item and be available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning again. As many of you know, the Star Awards have a long history as a program to recognize innovation and excellence across our institutions of higher education here in Texas. Indeed, this year, 2021, is the 20th year anniversary of this agency engaging with our institutions as in conferring Star Awards. So this is the 20th year anniversary of the Star Awards. Of course, the COVID-19 public health pandemic has been a time not only of crisis and disruption across the state, but also unprecedented change in higher education. Public and private institutions of higher education pivoted resources to create a safe and healthy environment for staff and students. They adjusted academic calendars and use of facilities, provided much-needed emergency financial aid to students, leveraged the use of instructional technology to ensure continuity of education, and much more. So for 2021, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board proposes to use the Star Awards to recognize institutions of higher education for successful and outstanding efforts to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency, including the implementation of innovative and successful strategies in service to their campus communities, but also to their broader community during the pandemic. So I'll now turn to my colleague, Dr. Ginger Gosman, who will go through a very brief overview to let you all know what we have in mind for the 2021 Star Awards. Dr. Gosman.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. It's lovely to yes, my presentation this morning. So I will give a brief history of the Star Awards program for those of you who are not familiar. I'll also let you know about our timeline for the award program this year. The STAR Awards has historically been tied to the goals and targets of the state strategic plan for higher education. It was initially launched in 2001 under the prior plan called Closing the Gaps by 2015. Criteria for the awards were restructured to align with 60 by 30 texts in 2016. The award program was suspended last year given the immense changes and pressures due to COVID-19. This year, we've planned a program to recognize response efforts by institutions as our. We also believe this is a fitting way to celebrate 20 years of our institutions going above and beyond to help students succeed. Moving forward, the STAR Awards will be aligned with a refreshed version of success. So I'd like to share with you some examples of how institutions have responded. Many exemplars of COVID response in Texas among our Texas. We're going to share examples from other states. For this presentation, we don't compromise the selection process. For example, the University of Arizona partnered with their state to test hundreds of thousands of blood samples last spring. The University of South Florida refined their personal protective equipment, or their PPE design, based on feedback they received from local health care providers. LSU was one of many institutions that followed the University of Arizona's model to test campus coronavirus. Faculty at MIT established a nonprofit to create open source contact tracing. Again, the STAR Awards program is a state program that will recognize Texas public, independent, and/or private institutions. The process for this year will begin very quickly. Applications will include a cover letter or a cover sheet that we're working on now, and up to 4 pages of narrative. We will be posting information within the next week to explain to the field how the process will work this year, and the application deadline will be. Unlike prior STAR Awards programs, the 2021 is designed to recognize institutions at the level, so 1 application per institution. Prior programs were recognizing program level success or innovation. So again, this year is 1 application.
Questions? I was going to ask, are you going to have or ask some board members? They used on it before, and I was just curious of the process. I know the commission. But before you've had or
Yeah, I think the quick response on that one, Mr. Chairman, is that because we have an accelerated timeline that we had mostly focused on sort of just internal staff reviews and then making recommendations to the commissioner. But to the extent, of course, that board members would want to provide input or take a look at nominations that we receive over the month of August, I'll defer to the commissioner. But I think we only had proposed it this way because we have an accelerated, or a very quick window for us to be able to do this, and then be able to maybe at your October board meeting announce winners, and then invite those winners to and winners is the wrong word, those that are recognized, right? Those institutions that are recognized, and invite them maybe to our leadership conference in early December. So it's kind of a quick timeline, but Commissioner, I don't know if you'd want to expand upon that at all, but that was what we had in mind. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I was just kind of giving some historical background and what's happened before, and having served. It's great competitive applications, I'll say that. And the last word I have is I would encourage all institutions to look in applying for that, because great recognition, and a lot of our institutions in our great work. So and involved in this process, and there's
wanted to underline a couple of points that, we're sort of in transition with the Star Awards, and this was in the full year, but especially in this round, what we'd like to do is take the opportunity to of some of the great work that's, especially great work that's happened on our campuses, not only on behalf of their students, faculty, staff, but for the benefit of. So we will be bringing sort of more recognitions and recommendations to the board. And the intent is not to sort of pick one community college, one university, one HRI, but to pick a broader range of efforts and going above and beyond them. We would excited for the board's participation, and we are going to be on a pretty compressed from when we received. I think it's good. I know it's just one timeline because we're just like it. Doing that, but I will tell you that I learned a lot about what's going on, reading all those applications, that the great things that our institutions and our state are doing in higher education. So I would encourage that update. It's very important. We want to highlight, like the commissioner said, the great work. Comments or question, Mr. Wilson?
Approximately how many institutions are there in the state that qualify, or in numbers?
I think there's probably over 800 because it's open to everyone, higher education in the state.
Right.
In fact, past winners have included K-12 organizations.
Yeah, certainly the infrastructure for, our independent colleges, our public 4 years, our community colleges, altogether we're talking over 100 at least institutions. So it is, and that's not even counting our HRIs, for example. So we want, as the commissioner suggests, we want to recognize excellence across our sectors, whether it's with our HRIs, community colleges, or public 4 years. I need to stop using hand. No, we want to do this as broadly as possible. And we know, the work that we were all doing last year that you all were aware of and involved in helping as well our institutions to adjust to the COVID pandemic. We know anecdotally that there were many examples of institutions, some coming together to take on initiatives to not only serve the health and safety of their students, faculty, and staff, but to serve their broader community or their broader region. We want to look for that. We want to encourage, Mr. Chairman, as you have done, institutions to apply. And we want
the awards will we out and
over the past few years, we've sort of done, I guess, maybe 3 to 5 at most, but I don't think we're going to limit ourselves to any particular number. We know there's excellence going on broadly across the state, so we won't cap it at any particular number.
Any questions or comments for the panel? Hearing no more comments, thank you, Deputy Commissioner Martinez. Thank you, Dr. Gussman, and working on this important project. Next agenda item 6E is an update of the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Gear Fund. I want to thank Governor Abbott and staff for working very closely with Commissioner Miller and the coordinating board on this, and trusted funds and the legislative leadership working with this through the coordinating board. It's consideration of possible action to delegate the full board and board committee authority, Rule 1.16A through C, to the Commissioner of Higher Education to approve all grant awards related to the gear and any contract awards under $1 million to carry out all program elements approved in 2020 and 2021 for expenditure of the gear funds. Dr. Keller.
So I'm invited to provide a briefing on the gear funds, and again, I want to underline your point about we're deeply appreciative of Governor Abbott, the legislative leadership, for their commitment to gear funds. So the work for the gear funds product of not just weeks but months of deliberations and discussions with the legislators, the governor's office, and their staff. I especially want to say how much we appreciate the support and Hicks from the governor's staff, who've been closely engaged with us along the way. So, as you know, the Governor Abbott and the legislative leadership recently announced the allocation of nearly $95 million in CARES Act gear funds for higher education through the agency. I'd like to walk you through the elements of this, and we have a couple of slides that we'll use, but I thought it might be helpful to begin by setting the context by revisiting our previous gear funds. Can we get the next slide? There we go. So the first round of gear funds totaled $175 million, with the first $103.5 million going out the door very quickly to provide direct aid to Texas. The majority of the $175 million was allocated for student financial aid. So $57 million was allocated to institutions to offset potential 5% reductions in FY 2021 to our Texas grants, our TEGs, and our TEOGs. And then there was an additional $46 million that was distributed to public institutions to provide emergency aid to students who had been impacted by COVID-19. Underline those two elements, because what we were seeing last, so the funds were awarded or allocated to the higher education at the end of the year. We had tens of thousands of students who were suddenly at risk of being disenrolled because their financial situations had suddenly changed. And so working closely with the governor's office, legislative leadership, and with our institutions, we were able to get that first $103, those two institutions out within days. And you'll be able to see that that helped serve tens of thousands of students across the state to help keep them back, help keep them enrolled. In addition to these funds, we were excited about another $46.5 million that was allocated to our public institutions for reskilling and upskilling. Student financial aid for students who need to reskill or upskill, get back on their feet, get back into the job market, and also to provide last-mile grants to Texans who are within striking distance. So we've talked before about how we have nearly 4 million Texans with some college and no credentials. Some of those are very close to completing. So a portion of the gear funds was allocated for these last-mile grants. So those funds also I want to highlight because there's generally very little financial aid available for short-term workforce education programs or state financial aid for those kind of last-mile grants. This was an important new direction for state support. There was also $10 million that was allocated for online learning that helped us establish the Division of Digital Learning, and you heard from Dr. Singh about the work that's underway. Already, the grants that have been allocated to institutions and our institutions are serving 10 across our state in new digital learning resources. And I'm very proud of what our agency and the institution are able to accomplish already with this first allocation of funds. Now, we learned some important lessons. Next slide. One is that I don't think we can overstate the importance of the
Eloise, this is Ricky Raven. Good morning. So in terms of dollar amounts on an annual basis, what would you think the level of reimbursement the university would make to the foundation?
Sorry, Mr. Raven, could you say again? Mr. Raven? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Sure.
Raven, are you on?
maybe we'll come back to the question. I think we're having some technical difficulties with the audio. So very quickly, just some of the lessons that we learned from this first allocation of your funds.
No. I'm just trying to get just to kind of get a number in mind as to what kind of ballpark we're talking about.
Mr. Raven, which portion? I'm sorry, Mr. Raven. I just did not hear your question.
Mr. Raven, if we can hold the questions after the commissioner's comments, that would be great. Thank you. You can hear us. First, we see that the changes that were already underway in the economy have picked up speed much faster than anyone anticipated. Much more in the direction of high skills and higher credentials, certainly higher skills and higher credentials in the average Texan. So that what we see is growing distance between the kinds of credentials and skills that have and what's going to be required for good jobs. And you saw some of that in the data that Associate Commissioner shared around from the 60 by 30 Texas work. So our Texas institutions are the tip of the spear for the reskilling and upskilling that's going to need to happen, and they're eager to serve these students. But historically, what we've done is we've just counted on individual institutions to go and identify students who stopped out or dropped out, to do that on their own, through their own marketing and outreach efforts, which has been very challenging for institutions, especially when we're talking about adult learners who may have been out of higher education for some time. And in addition, there are persistent challenges across key demographics. As we discussed yesterday in the committee, and you heard from Deputy Commissioner Lori Fye, we're well below our 60 by 30 targets, specifically for Hispanic students, African American students, and male students. So we know that we're going to have to make some more focused efforts to engage these critical populations and help them enroll and persist in higher education. So quickly, let me, if you advance the slide, I'll walk through the different elements in GEAR funding. These were developed in close consultation with Governor's Office and legislative leadership and with input from our institutions. So first, the majority of the funds are going to focus on expanding capacity in our institutions for high-demand, high-value educational programs. So this is broken out in several components. So first, up to $25 million allocated for launching the Texas True Initiative. That's a initiative that was established by Senate Bill 1102 for our community and technical colleges, specifically focused on expanding our capacity in high-value workforce education. There will also be grants that are provided to institutions to support creating or redesigning or expanding micro-credentials, short-term programs that could potentially be stackable with other kind of short-term credentials to help students not just take a few courses, but create a credential that's directly aligned with the needs of good jobs and career opportunities. There will be grants that are provided to expand our institution's capabilities around data collection and infrastructure analytics. That includes supporting their development and submission of course sequences. And then finally, there were $5 million that was specifically allocated to support work-based learning and apprenticeships, including apprenticeships that are incorporated into these short-term programs in high-demand fields. Under the expanding capacity, we are going to be working in close partnership with the Texas Workforce Commission also to support
standing up a state credential library. That was one of the provisions that was included in House Bill 3767 that formalized our tri-agency partnership, and that will also be used to, some of these funds will also be used to underwrite technical analyses that are going to be necessary to support the Community College Finance Commission that was established by Senate Bill 1230. The next major tranche of funds is around student financial aid. That'll support an additional round of reskilling grants to institutions where there'll be seed grants to expand capacity and also funding available for financial aid to help accelerate enrollments in these high-demand programs. And additional financial aid for last-mile grants for Texans with some college but no credential who are in striking distance. And there'll be also under financial aid resources that are allocated specifically around student success and equity initiatives. That includes expanded advising resources, training deployed through Texas OnCourse, and expanding our Advise Texas network to include additional institutions, including HBCUs and Hispanic-serving institutions. There'll be 2 student financial aid pilot programs that we're particularly excited about. One is designed specifically to target transfer students. We did see a decline in vertical transfer during the pandemic. And so there'll be some financial aid that'll be specifically focused on high-achieving students to help facilitate their transfer from 2-year to 4-year institutions. Now we've about 56% of students who are eligible for Texas Grant are funded through that program. That means that transfer students generally miss the window. 95% of Texas Grant funding goes to more traditional first-time, full-time in college university students and does not go to transfer students. So we'll have some funding that we use to pilot and hopefully smooth the way for transfer for students completing associate's degrees. And a leadership and scholarship program that's specifically focused on high-achieving, low-income students. We've talked a number of times about some of the disturbing data that we saw about high-achieving students, particularly students eligible for automatic admission to our universities who are not participating in education in Texas or anywhere in the United States. So we'll have some capital to work in partnership with the institutions to set up a portable scholarship and leadership program focused on those high-achieving, low-income students. Then there are 2 elements that relate to student advising that I'd want to highlight. One is the $4 million that we requested as an exceptional item in our LAR for scaling the work that's developed through our GradTex initiative. So under GradTex, as a reminder, we're working in partnership with institutions, Greater Houston Partnership, on a coordinated marketing campaign. And so instead of just counting on individual institutions to identify and re-enroll students who dropped out and stopped out, can we drive traffic to one place where here's the range of opportunities that are available to them, and here are the kinds of programs, here's how that might connect to job opportunities and to get connected with institutions. So that work is being incubated in Greater Houston. Governor and legislative leadership opted to direct $4 million of the GEAR funds for scaling that work across the. We will also expand the scope of that work in a new initiative that we're calling My Texas Future. So where GradTex has been primarily focused on adult learners who have some college and no credential, My Texas Future will include secondary students, also current college students who are contemplating. So if we look out months, 2 years, the idea is to have one place that we drive traffic. So if you're a high school student, if you're a community college student who's thinking about transfer, if you're an adult learner, if you're a veteran, you can learn about the range of opportunities that are available. You can explore options. explore how that connects to career opportunities, start to develop a plan, and get connected to our Texas Institute. So again, all of that work being designed in close partnership with our systems and our institutions, also with employers and our chambers. Finally, I'd highlight $4 million for data security to support completion of the agency's legacy application portfolio modernization project. That was another exceptional item in our legislative appropriations request to help shore up the security of systems, particularly systems that we're using to facilitate the submission of sensitive data from institutions or from individuals to the coordinating board. So there are a lot of different elements of this work here. Of course, this is all work in progress. The cake, let me emphasize also that cake is not baked on all of these program requirements. We'll be working closely with the institutions on specific grant applications and how those will be administered, what the reporting requirements will be like. We have a unique opportunity to do important work on behalf of our students and our institutions. We're all very cognizant, though, that these federal stimulus funds have a very short fuse on them. We're going to have to move very, very quickly with our institutions and other partners to get our grants and contracts for. And so I know this is a lot of information to cover. I'm happy to answer questions about any aspect of this work, but again, do want to emphasize how we deeply appreciate that support and partnership from the governor, from the legislative leadership, from our institutions, from our board in making.
Thank you, Commissioner. Board, any comments or questions for the Commissioner? Mr. Wilson?
The 2022 deadline, is that to contract for the services or to actually have
get the
money
dollars
expended?
out the door? It's actually to get the dollars out the door. So we are going to have to move very, very quickly to be able to award grants and contracts.
My question is as a follow-up, I guess has been defined as the two old men on this board, is that first round was 175 rounds. Next round, which we're not assured of getting, $400 million. Very short time. You and I discussed before the meeting that the danger sometimes all of this money, spend it just to spend it. The question is, what is the accountability, the analysis for making sure that what we're spending this money on is bang for the buck? What is the accountability required for that? Because you and I and Ms. Schwartz, when we met with the governor, when he granted these, he was very emphatic about return. I'd like to know how we gauge that and where the accountability is.
I appreciate the question and absolutely agree that we want to make sure that we're not just getting dollars out the door. We're not just able to point to expenditures or even new websites or other resources created, but where it's actually had impact. And there's a return on that investment. We can see the return on that investment and new programs being stood up, programs being expanded, folks enrolling, actually receiving credentials, and able to make that transition to good jobs in particular. So the specific metrics are going to vary across each of these different strands of work. We have already in that first round of GEAR funds worked closely with the institutions so that we could have reporting requirements to be able to answer questions about how many students would be served and where we could track over time and connect it to other data that we have. We also, I want to emphasize that we have tried to the extent we can to structure these programs so we can learn about what's more or less effective and we can make changes along the way. So, for example, in the first round of reskilling and upskilling grants, we worked on those grant parameters in consultation with the institutions and with leading state and national experts. We put the call for proposals out there. What we found is that already by the time we had the call for proposals out there, the landscape had changed. There had been another round of federal funds that was distributed directly to institutions. So then we needed to pivot. We needed to adjust so that what we were doing with financial aid could better complement other things. The institution actually did change the requirements even for the folks who had already been awarded funds. What I would anticipate is that we're going to continue to use that same kind of approach of where we'll not just kind of announce and deploy funds, but we want to be able to iterate over time to lean into the strategies that are going to be more effective. So what I would want to be able to do is go to the governor, be able to go to the legislature and to say, here's what we've learned, here's what's especially effective, here's how we were able to use one-time funds to get that bang for the buck, but also in ways that are going to generate rights that are going to be important for the long term and that are going to help bolster our case for recurring investments in higher education that are going to be better aligned with what the state.
One of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we knew so much data modernization and other work needed to happen, but when the funding isn't there, you end up piecemealing and slowly advancing and never having a solid, comprehensive at one time to be able to accelerate. I think what many people knew we needed to do is phenomenal, and two silver linings of the pandemic.
I certainly agree. I mean, I do hope that we will be able to get a no-cost extension from the feds on these funds that would give us a little bit more runway to make sure that we're using all of these funds effectively and efficiently. But we have to organize as if the current deadlines are going to remain. We're going to have to move very aggressively to continue to refine those comprehensive strategies and make sure that we're working across multiple fronts to be able to make the best possible.
Any other questions or comments? Raven, did you have your question, or can you hear us? Sure that we have accessibility with technology. The members that are also on the call. Now we're going to, if no more questions or comments for the Commissioner on the topic, I'm sorry. Can you hear us, Mr. Raven? Don? On mute, but can hear us?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, are you talking to me?
There we go. Yes, I just wanted to make sure, did you have any questions on this topic?
No, sorry, I'm sorry. No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, just checking in. Make sure you can hear us. Thank you,
yes.
Mr. Raven. Now, Ms. Bunker-Henderson will present the item proposing delegation of authority relating to contract and grant approval.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm just going to kind of pick up the baton here, and I will not retread a lot of grounds that the Commissioner has already covered. The GEAR funding, the expiration in less than a year from now, in June of 2022, necessitates us to take, I think, a little bit of action to give some additional flexibility, if the board members are comfortable in doing so, to the Commissioner to allow him to approve some of the authority that currently falls to the board under 1.16A through C. We have a lot of flexibility in the contracts and procurement process right now due to the Governor's disaster proclamation. That flexibility to bypass some portions of the procurement process is essential to be able to expend these monies on time. But these, as you heard, are very high value and high priority items. And given such, I think the contracts and procurement team would ask for the board, if they're comfortable, to authorize the commissioner to approve the individual contracts that fall under $1 million, and then any grant items, which would normally fall to the board's authority. So if the board is comfortable doing so, we would ask for that additional.
Members, any questions for our council? Okay, members, then is there a motion to delegate full board and board committee authority of Rule 1.16A through C to the Commissioner of Higher Education to approve all grant awards and any contract awards under $1 million to carry out all program elements approved in 2020 and 2021 for expenditure of the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Gear Fund? I have a motion by Mr. Torn. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Schwartz. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Okay, hearing no objection. On to approval of the consent calendar. Hearing no objection. So now that the authority has been delegated to the Commissioner of Higher Education for all grant awards and any contract awards under $1 million to carry out all program elements approved in 2020 and 2021 for expenditure of the Governor's Emergency Education Gear Fund, any objection to withdrawal of agenda items 7C2 through 7C10, 9P1, 9P2, 9P6 through 9P10, and 10C be removed from today's agenda? Objection? Not hearing no objection, items 7C2 through 10, 9P1 and 9P2, 9P6 through 10, and 10C are withdrawn. Okay, so now we will move on to agenda item 6, is approval of the consent calendar. We're going to take up the consent calendar in two parts, the non-rule items and then the rule items. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that would need more of our attention. Highlighted items in gray are in the consent items on the agenda. Had time in advance to review the items, and of course, any board member can request any agenda item be removed from the consent calendar. That will give us an opportunity to discuss the item or items in full later during the meeting. The items that we have placed on the non-rule consent calendar today are approval of the committee's recommendations in the following items. 7B is consideration of approval of the 60 by 30 Texas Progress Report. 7D is consideration of adopting the recommendation related to the approval of the nominated members of the Formula Funding Advisory Committee for the 2024 through 2025 biennium. Item 7E is consideration of adopting the recommendation relating to the certification of the gifts that are fundable through the Texas Research Initiative Incentive Program, TRIP, for emerging research universities. Item 7F is consideration of adopting the recommendation relating to the approval of the facilities audit report. Item 7G is the review of facility projects that are submitted to the coordinating board pursuant to the Texas Education Codes Section 61.0572 and 61.058. Item 7H is consideration of adopting the Texas Grant Program Report, which is Texas Education Code Sections 56.311B-1. 9B is consideration of adopting the recommendation relating to the report on the effectiveness of the Open Educational Resource Grant Program, Senate Bill 810, 85th Texas Legislature Regular Session, and Rider 55, 86th Texas Legislature Regular Session. Item 9D is the report on activities of the Joint Admission Medical Program. Item 9F is the report on activities of the Family Practice Residency Advisory Committee, including the report on trusted funds distributed in fiscal year 2021. Item 9H is report on activities of the Lower Division Academic Course Guide Manual Advisory Committee. Item 9I, consideration of adopting the recommendation relating to the changes in the Lower Division Academic Course Guide Manual. Item 9J is a report on activities in the medical education and graduate medical education programs. Item 9K is a report on activities in the Autism Grant Program. Item 9L is the report on activities on the Learning Technology Advisory Committee. Item 9N is the report on institutional requests related to new degree and certificate programs acted on by the Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner since the last board meeting. And item 9O is consideration of adopting January 2021 annual compliance reports for institutions under authorization, names beginning with A through O. Item 9P1 is consideration of adopting the request to extend the current contract with the Higher Education Artificial Intelligence vendor for the Virtual Advising Project, ADVI, for the term of 1 year. Item 9P2, consideration of possible action to extend the current contract with an Open Educational Resources Repository vendor for the OER Text Repository for a term of 1 year. Item 9Q is consideration of approving the appointment of members to the 1, Apply Texas Advisory Committee, 2, Certification Advisory Committee, 3, the Learning Technology Advisory Committee, 4, the Lower Division Academic Course Guide Manual Advisory Committee. Item 9R is consideration of adopting the issuance of requests for applications for the 1 Autism Grant Program, 2, the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Educational Leadership Grant, 3, the Emergency and Trauma Care Education Partnership Program, 4, the Graduate Medical Education Expansion Program, 5, the Graduate Medical Education Planning Grants Program, and 6, the Statewide Preceptorship Program, and item 9B, Report on Grants and Contracts. Do I have a motion for approval of the non-rule consent calendar?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any against? Hearing none, the motion passes. Members, the next item on the consent agenda and board rules, the rules placed on the consent calendar are those that are either technical, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around which there is consensus. Members, the rules on consent are 7I1, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 1, Subchapter J, Sections 1.151 and 1.152 of Board Rules concerning the Financial Aid Advisory Committee. 7I2 is consideration of adopting the proposal repeal of Chapter 22, Subchapter AA, Sections 22.729 through 22.736 concerning the Kenneth H. Ashworth Fellowship Program. And item 7I3, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter C, Section 22.53 of Board Rules concerning the repayment of loans. Item 7I4 is consideration of adopting the proposed repeal of Chapter 22, Subchapter M, Sections 22.265 concerning the authority to transfer funds, and Section 9-S1, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to the Texas Administrative Code, Title 19, Chapter 1, Subchapter G, Rule 1.131, Subchapter H, Rule 1.138, Subchapter 1, Rule 1.145, Subchapter 0, Rule 1. That's Subchapter O, Rule 1.188 and Subchapter P, Rule 1.195, and board rules concerning the advisory committees and their abolishment date. Members, do I have a motion to remove any of the rule items? If you want to remove, anyone want to remove any of the rule items from the consent calendar? Do I have a motion for the approval of the rule consent calendar? Motion by Ms. Schwartz. Second? Second by Mr. Torn. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 7 are matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics, chaired by Vice Chairman Mr. Wilson. Wilson.
Thank you for joining us for the matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. Unfortunately, Mr. Almar was unable to be here today, so I will report on the committee items in his stead. Agenda item 7B was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda items 7C 1 through 10 are proposed contract and grant approval. Agenda item 7C1 is consideration and possible action to solicit and or enter into technology services contracts totaling up to $1.5 million to support creation and implementation of the student public portal in furtherance of both the GradTex 2.0 initiative, associated labor market tool, and other future agency initiatives to be funded by federal Wagner Pazer 7B fund granted to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board by the Texas Workforce Commission. Ms. Tiffany Tatum, Director for Strategic Initiatives, will be available to answer any questions. So you just want to refresh everybody's memory as to...
Yes, the $1.5 million in Wagner Pfizer funds are intended for the use of the My Texas Future portal in furtherance of the GradTex initiative. At present, we currently are looking at key pieces for implementation. That includes our education and training element, our resource library, as well as our career and career pathways information here. We right now also have already contracted with one entity that we're working with, but plans are to expand as we work towards our statewide enhancement and expansion of this initiative to better support the students that we are attempting to reach.
Great. Any questions? Tatum? If not, do I have a motion for the approval of the consideration and possible action to solicit and or enter into technology service contract totaling up to $1.5 million, support creation and implementation of the student public portal in the furtherance of both the GradTex 2.0 initiative, associated labor market tool, and other future agency initiatives to be funded by the Wagner Pazer 7B funds grant to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board by the Texas Workforce Commission? Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, members, please indicate in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Agenda items 7C2 through 10 were considered and disposed of earlier in the agenda. Agenda item 7D through 7I, 1 through 10, were approved on the consent calendar. This concludes our portion of the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next on our agenda is lunch. Schedule. Good. So the board will now break for lunch and an early lunch. And while a quorum will be present, no public business or public policy over which this board has supervision or control will be discussed. We intend to reconvene in 30 minutes. Call it okay, thank you.